Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Keys to Modernizing Registry Participation webinar. We're thrilled to have you with us. I'm looking forward to making a few introductions in a minute, but before we get started, each of you have been muted to maintain the quality of the presentation. However, on your lower left-hand side of your screen, you should see a small comment bubble. Please click that bubble to submit questions throughout the program. The content of this webinar will last about 30 minutes, and we've saved some time for questions at the end. Our speaker will stop at the end of each section to answer relevant questions. This webinar is being recorded. We'll make the recording available to registrants for another view, or if you'd like to share it with colleagues. For those of you who aren't familiar with Q-Centrix, let me take this opportunity to say hello. Q-Centrix partners with more than 350 hospitals throughout the country to manage their quality data. This is possible because we have the largest and broadest bench of quality information specialists with more than 650 quality experts throughout the country, and our market-leading technology, Q-Apps, the only healthcare quality information system. Speaking of Q-Apps, many of you may have seen our press release this morning. We're proud to announce that we received STS certification for our Universal Registry solution. So we're now certified to submit for CAP-PCI, ACTION, ICD, and STS. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First, my name is Michelle Galvin, and I work in the marketing department at Q-Centrix. I'll be facilitating the questions throughout today's program. And for those of you who have participated in Q-Centrix webinars in the past, you'll recognize our main speaker today, Vice President of Product Development, Brian Foy. Brian frequently speaks on behalf of Q-Centrix. In fact, he recently led a roundtable of executives through a similar discussion of today's topic during the IHI Leadership Conference in California. He sits on the NQF Readmission Reduction Committee and has spoken in several other quality forums, including NCHQ. Prior to joining Q-Centrix, Brian spent most of his career with strategic accountability for the software applications in the healthcare information technology, or HIT space. Before his time in HIT, he oversaw the implementation of a care and condition management reporting system at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. He has a master's in health services administration from Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, who many of you may have seen playing in the Elite Eight just this past weekend, and a bachelor's in economics from Ohio University. Before I hand it over to Brian, I'd just like to remind you that you can submit questions through the comment bubble on the lower left-hand side. Brian, thank you for joining us today. Let's get started.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you to everyone on the phone for joining us this morning, this afternoon, depending on your time zone. Before I get into our content today, I just wanted to say I'm really excited about this particular webinar. I think we're taking a little bit of a different angle and hopefully providing some background on some pretty unique topics surrounding the issues of centralization and automation, and particularly around submitting data to third-party professional societies and registries. So just to give you a quick recap on what we want to cover, basically, two or three big topics. And just to reiterate one more time, we want you to ask questions. We have plenty of time for questions today, and we're going to take a unique approach and pause 2 or 3 times along the course of our journey to address your questions relevant to each section. But today, we're going to explore a couple of things. First of all, how emerging trends we're observing in our industry, particularly around registry participation, might impact you and us in the coming months and years. Now, first, we're going to explore some of the implications of greater automation and centralization around quality reporting. This is a trend that has been happening, we've observed over the past 3 or 4 years, and I think it's more relevant today than it's ever been. Second, we want to give you a little brief overview of natural language processing and maybe some other issues around modern technology and how you might be able to deploy that technology in pursuit of your broader quality measurement goals. We want to explore how we think it's going to influence our work in the next several years. And finally, we're going to tie it all together at the end of the presentation with some observations and best practices around getting people out of data and maybe into higher top-of-license activities like process and quality improvement and patient care. And that's really oftentimes the overriding goal in a lot of the conversations that we have with folks. But first, let's get into the implications of automation and centralization and this increasing importance of registry data. We are absolutely on the path to to full automation in quality reporting, but we are very early in that journey. You've had interfaces to your your cardiovascular reporting software for a long time, where you get maybe a proportion of that data pre-populated. This past several months, we've had, as an industry, to submit ECQM data to CMS for the first time ever. And that really is the first foray by the regulatory bodies to start to get some value from this $30 billion investment we made in EMRs since 2009 with meaningful use. But where are we in this evolution of automation, particularly in hospital quality reporting? We thought we'd use, hopefully, an interesting metaphor. We talk about this oftentimes when we're chatting with our partners. We want to use this metaphor that the Society of Automotive Engineers, or the SAE, originally came up with, and this is their automated vehicle classifications system. This is what that industry uses to help communicate to that industry where we are in the evolution of getting towards automated or driverless cars. We think there's a nice little dovetail with what we're talking about in quality reporting. So there are 6 levels, starting with 0, that the SAE uses to communicate what's going on in that industry. The basic level of automated driverless cars is that the automated system has 0 vehicle control, but it issues warnings. So the driver is always in control of the car in this level, but the car might be giving feedback to the user about whether or not they're going to hit something, maybe a beeping noise. Probably a lot of your cars have some flashing lights or tones that it uses to tell you when you're about to run over the neighbor's cat. But you're always in control of the car. At level 2 then, the very next level, the driver still must always be ready to take control at any time. So you have to be, even though the automated system may have control of the car, the driver really has to be paying attention as though he or she were still operating the vehicle. This automated system may include features such as adaptive cruise control or parking assistance. Maybe some of your cars slam on the brakes for you if you are coming up on a car in front of you too quickly. That's level 1. In level 2, the driver is obliged to detect objects and events and respond if the automated system fails to respond properly. So at level 2, you're still mainly in control, or at least paying attention as though you were in control of the car, but the automated system is executed things like accelerating, braking, and steering while the vehicle is in operation. At level 3 now, we're really getting closer to full automation. Within known limited environments such as freeways, the driver can safely turn their attention away. You no longer have to be paying attention throughout the entire operation of the motor vehicle now. When the car is in a certain situation, it can take full control, and the operator of the vehicle is allowed to turn their attention elsewhere. Level 4 and 5, then, we're really in a situation where the automated system is in more than 50% control of the vehicle. At level 4, all but a few environments, the passenger is able to divert their attention elsewhere. Maybe some corner cases where in certain types of weather, the automated system can't handle that or it's not functioning properly. And then at level 5, other than setting the destination and turning the vehicle on, the car is in complete control of the operation of the vehicle while it's in motion. So that should give you some sense for maybe how other industries think about automation and the levels of control that the automated systems might be taking control of a system. But truthfully, our opinion is that healthcare is still at level 0. With ECQM, we had to, as an industry, we had to review those results and rinse those results and understand why things weren't mapping properly. We ultimately owned the submission of that data. We had to push a button as a human being. You had to upload a file to QNet and submit that. You still have to do that with your registry reporting. So we really feel as though we're at level 0, but maybe this metaphor can give you some insight into the art of the possible, and then also how you think about this evolution from no automation and alerting to true automation. So we're on this journey that almost certainly will take longer than the automotive industry will take or any other industry to advance. Healthcare is notoriously slow in their implementation of new technology, as many of you know. But the point we're trying to make is that it has begun. We are on the continuum. It's been introduced in earnest to the quality department, and you all for the reasons I just mentioned. Turning our attention now to centralization, and this is another important trend that we're witnessing. Like automation, we are in the very early stages, we think, of centralization and consolidation of external reporting obligations and capabilities. And what we're witnessing is that more and more health systems have launched programs to centralize quality reporting functions. If you do some searches online, if you're a student of the market at all, it's a simple exercise to find presentations that have been uploaded to the internet that have been made on behalf of state-level hospital associations where a system is touting that they've had early success centralizing. And many job titles you'll see today for process improvement or quality improvement coordinators will include descriptions about working with an enterprise, descriptions about creating enterprise-level dashboards and reporting capabilities, and functioning and interacting with a centralized abstraction function. So more and more we're seeing this trend. Maybe anecdotally, I would say 2 in 10, 3 in 10 hospitals are doing this, and it obviously skews towards multi-hospital systems. But we really see centralization happening in 2 distinct ways. First, at the hospital level, quality leadership at the hospital are taking on a larger and larger role in external reporting as accountability for registries gets moved. In the past, when we were talking to our partners, we almost exclusively saw the quality department in charge of regulatory reporting, patient safety, and infection prevention and control. And then we saw the individual service lines truly in charge of their registry accountability. They might get an assist occasionally from the vice president of quality, from the chief medical officer, and evaluating their results and coming up with improvement programs. But by and large, the trend was in the past for the service lines to be in charge of those capabilities. We see that changing. Maybe ultimately changing to a place where hospitals might have a new role in the future called a chief reporting officer, where one individual is actually accountable for all of the data elements that go outside the hospital's 4 walls, including registries. So that's the first way that hospitals are consolidating this data. The second way that we see consolidation and centralization happening is really probably what you were thinking of when I first introduced the topic a couple of moments ago. So within systems, reporting in general is becoming more centralized. Think of abstractors that have accountability for records at more than one topic, at more than one facility. It's where you're actually going to do the data aggregations in a centralized manner and then give reports back to the individual facilities to tell them how they're doing. And so the accountability with the function of abstraction reporting really lies with the corporate entity, and then the improvement and analysis of those results truly lies with the individual facilities. But what are the implications of these trends? What should you be thinking about maybe as a person who's accountable for quality reporting or registry reporting at a hospital or multiple hospitals within a system? We have a couple observations about this. First of all, the marketing this way. Because of the fact that through centralization and consolidation, hospitals can save money, because of that primary fact, many hospitals with accountability for these activities will move towards centralization. And so the way we think about it is, it's not if, it's when. Whether your hospital is 10 years away from really truly centralizing or 18 months away, really it's probably on your radar at this point. Hospitals and systems that successfully centralize will be able to increase data quality, they will be able to increase timeliness, and they'll be able to save money. And we think this is relevant for everybody because this will give hospitals that do these activities a competitive advantage in the geographies that they serve. Hospitals that aren't there yet, and there are many valid reasons for not centralizing. We're not saying that everyone has to do that, but I think a point that we want to make is hospitals that aren't there yet might be thinking about the other hospitals that are doing this in their geographic areas as a potential competitive threat because they can be more efficient, they can improve results, and that it's particularly in a value-based purchasing paradigm that can be considered a competitive threat. So that's one thing you absolutely want to be thinking about. Next, whether you've already consolidated or are contemplating a consolidation strategy, you should be thinking about how you'll maximize the scale you expect from your efforts. So we don't think you should consolidate for consolidation's sake or centralize for centralization's sake. You really should have some more product strategic objectives in mind. Some questions to think about. How can you reduce overlapping vendors where they fulfill similar functions? Many of you who worked in multiple hospitals or in systems with multiple hospitals have likely already encountered the issue either in your information technology in your EMR or your submission vendors where you've got more than one vendor that can do the same thing. And so truly you need to be thinking about selecting vendors that give you enterprise capabilities, and how will you consolidate around vendors to get further leverage around your information technology strategy. The second of all, do you have the expertise within your organization to handle every quality metric you need to collect and submit at scale? You may have organizational mandate to do centralization. You may have explored all the activities that are viable to centralize, but you may find that you've got a big backlog on one regulatory measure or a registry topic that prevents you from being able to centralize. You may find that you don't have the right people at a corporate scale to be able to do all of the volume you need to do. So you really need to ask yourself some questions about the expertise that you have in this future state, and you may need some help getting there. So even if your future state strategy doesn't involve a vendor, you may have to consider a vendor, at least on the short term, to alleviate some kind of backlog or some problem you have that's preventing you from doing that. And then finally, an obvious question might be, what benefits do you expect from your efforts? And if you've already done this, have you taken a look back at the rationale you had months ago or years ago for centralizing? Are you delivering on the promises that you made to your organization when you decided to centralize? So are you saving money? Have you improved quality? Have you improved the quality of your efforts at the service line level? Valid questions to ask now, even if you've already centralized, but certainly if you're considering this kind of a strategy, make sure you're setting baselines so you can continually hold yourself accountable to your organization for the benefits that you've achieved or are not yet achieving through your centralization efforts. And so that's the end of our first section, Michelle. I'd like to ask you if we've caught any questions yet.
Yes, so thank you for that. It gave us a lot to think about when we consider centralizing. You spoke a lot of the advantages about centralizing. Are there any potential downfalls to centralization?
Maybe I'll just nuance that question a little bit in thinking. So first of all, for the reasons I mentioned, if you're not able to implement what you set out to do, certainly there's a downfall. If you promise savings to your organization, you're not able to deliver those savings. That's a valid question that you need to be asking yourself why you're not doing that. But maybe sort of the unasked question here is those talking points maybe presuppose that centralization is a foregone conclusion, and I don't mean to insinuate that at all. We talk to a lot of hospitals who are not centralizing, and centralization is not ready for them yet. And one big reason is that they are having a hard time imagining how they will be able to improve quality without really having their hands dirty in that data. And I've got maybe some talking points for that at the end of our talk today, but that is a valid reason not to be centralizing. You absolutely cannot centralize at the expense of improvement or patient care. And so if your organization is not there yet culturally and you really feel like you have to understand those data elements, that's absolutely a valid reason. Do we have any other questions?
No, that's all we have on this section.
Okay. I have to admit, the next section is was my favorite part of today's content to write. It's a little bit wonky, and when I said maybe we've got a unique approach to today's webinar, I think this is the reason why. We're going to facilitate a little discussion now on natural language processing and some emerging technologies that we think can move the needle on quality, on efficiency, on cost savings, et cetera. And we thought it'd be a good idea just to educate our partners and potential partners on the language, the talking points here. So as you're exploring partners who do this, you can start to ask some more insightful questions about how it could help your business and the practice of care in the coming years. One of the overriding, I think, facts that we realize about what's going on in healthcare today is that we're not going to be able to reorganize or centralize our way to the place that we need to be to meet the demands that are being placed on us by the market and regulators. We have more obligations than ever to submit data. We have more data than ever in those obligations to submit. And we have less resources to do that than ever. We need to be focusing on great patient care and and metrics that move patient-reported outcomes. And so we need to get more efficient. And so we think that we're going to need to make a technological leap in our industry. Technologies like natural language processing have finally evolved to a place where they are effective and financially viable to deploy in the healthcare industry. And just as an aside, the science of natural language processing, and I'm going to explain what that means in detail in a moment, but the science of natural language processing is not new at all. This was introduced in the 50s as a potential technological leap. And so the science itself is not new. I would say the commoditization of that science is finally reaching a place where it makes sense to deploy in a low-margin industry like healthcare. So first of all, let's spend a couple of minutes on what natural language processing is. Natural language processing, or NLP, I'll refer to it as NLP for the remainder of the webinar, is the ability of a computer program to understand human speech as it is spoken. NLP is a component of a broader science called artificial intelligence. And I'm just going to read two sentences here. I'm sorry if I'm going to drone a little bit, but I think it's important just to get this part right. NLP technologies assist machines in understanding the language used by humans to communicate both in reading and in writing. This form of communication assists the computer in performing various other additional tasks. NLP techniques extract important information from the vast amount of clinical data and analyze it for enhanced processing and analytics. And just maybe in layman's terms, what that means and what our company is exploring initially these days is, how can you take a blurb of text, which we would call unstructured data, a paragraph of notes, something somebody has verbally transcribed into a system, how can you take that data and extract the relevant and meaningful information out of that blurb of text and organize it in a way that a machine can actually act upon it? And you would think a table or a data mart, something that traditionally software is able to consume. That's really what natural language processing is. It's taking something that's unstructured that a human being communicated and we recorded, and turning it into the bits and bytes that a machine needs to actually leverage that information. And then maybe one quick observation that we found in our research is that the global healthcare natural language processing market is expected to grow $1.5 billion in the next 5 years. So I think we're on the precipice of a lot of disruption and evolution in this space. And financial analysts agree, particularly in healthcare, that we're going to add a lot of value to enterprises in the next 5 years or so, just using this technology alone. So why is this relevant, though? Why is a technology-enabled services company that helps hospitals manage quality data, why are we talking to you about natural language processing, and why is it relevant? And there's a couple of observations we've got here. First, there has been a very large increase in the amount of unstructured clinical data that exists in the world. The rule of thumb that experts estimate is that 80% or more of the data we're creating and storing is unstructured. And we're adding more to that volume every single day. We're using more smart or connected devices. Machines have the capability to listen to our voices now. You can have a conversation with your cell phone. There's a device sitting in your kitchen that allows you to order toilet paper when you run out. So the amount of unstructured data that we're adding to the existing volume is just growing and growing and growing, and that includes healthcare. Those sort of funny little anecdotes aside, you've always been able to transcribe data into the medical record, and so we're adding to that volume. And then the other thing that's happening is that EMRs have largely failed to create interfaces that allow clinicians to capture and counter data in efficient and structured methods. And I think all of us sort of understand natively that it's not reasonable to continually ask providers to learn new systems for documenting encounters so that that critical data finds its way into a place where we can report it. And therefore, the critical data is finding its way into notes. And so we're not just adding a lot of unstructured data, we're adding a lot of critical data we need to improve care to that volume of unstructured data. So that's why it's relevant. We need better tools to extract value and make observations out of the data that we're storing. So there's a couple things we wanted to explore, maybe the downsides and the upsides to using NLP. And right now, what we're trying to accomplish, I know we've sort of gone on this, we're sort of deep into NLP right now, which maybe you weren't expecting to do. But what we're trying to do is just give you a few tools you can use to maybe make better strategic decisions as your businesses have to evolve and you're going to have to partner with technology and services vendors along that journey. And so just a quick exploration of some of the potential pitfalls in deploying technology like this. So how can NLP improve accuracy and efficiency? But then what are the risks of relying on emerging technologies to capture data, and how can you mitigate those risks? And so one of the big problems with deploying natural language processing and engaging a machine to effectively answer a question is overconfidence. We think we got some good examples of that. And overconfidence is just simply when a system is created to provide answers, it must not simply give you its best guess at the answer. That system must transparently provide the user with information about how likely the answer it gives is trustworthy. We've got some references at the end of this presentation, and you'll all get the deck. And so we're citing where we got a lot of this information. You can always read more about this. But I got this example of a Google snippet. And on your screens now you should see screenshots of the results of 2 Google searches. So Google snippet is when you pose a question to the search field, or when you pose a search in the form of a question, Google has started providing an answer, or its best guess of that answer, to your question in something called a snippet. And it does this about 15% of the time. A Google snippet is the image on the left on the screens you see there. And basically Google is trying to make search more effective by answering the question you posed versus just giving you a bunch of results it thinks are in the ballpark of the question you posed. But take a really close look at that example. What if that answer is incorrect? Do you see anywhere on that result that gives you any insight into how confident Google is that that is the actual truth? You do not. Google didn't provide you any context whatsoever for how likely it is that that is correct. And you can see it opposed to just what I would consider a more traditional Google search on the right. If I say that, tell me what ESPN is, it's going to give me the ESPN website and then a couple of other suggested websites. And so it's not hard to imagine a scenario where similar but different, or even worse, conflicting answers exist within unstructured data within a medical record. So this is something we need to be exploring as we try and race ahead to the future and deploy new technology in support of this effort of lowering costs and raising quality. When we rely on systems and technology to provide us answers, it's got to give us some context. And so, frankly, that's our answer to these questions as we move along. What we've been reading about is something called productive humility in the systems that we're designing. And so something I'd like to empower you with are maybe some questions to pose as you consider new technology in your operations. Some important questions are, when should we sacrifice speed for accuracy? How should uncertainty be communicated? What context for an answer should we be designing? How can we incorporate speech or, frankly, other low-resolution interfaces into our efforts? And so, frankly, like I said, as you're exploring partners, as you're deploying this technology in your strategic efforts, you want to make sure that your partners are exploring all angles of this, and we're not just deploying technology because it's going to make things better without any thoughtfulness whatsoever. And so maybe we give you an example of how you incrementally move the needle on what we're doing today, and when I say we, I mean collectively as an industry, versus racing ahead to whatever future state we think we need to get to for automation. And so we want to give you this example of a transcription interface you could consider creating. Abstractors today, whether they're in your organizations at a facility or working for us, are effectively doing transcription now manually, obviously. They are transcribing data from one information system to another to submit it to a third party. But what if you were doing this verbally? We think that could speed you up quite a bit. So you could deploy some natural language processing technology in an area where basically an abstractor could dictate what he or she is seeing in the record in response to questions on the source system where you needed to submit data. And you'd want to devise some audio cues that allow you to understand if you mistranscribed a piece of data, or if the machine didn't hear you accurately, or if it was sort of a tricky question that you were answering. And so we got a couple examples. Imagine going through a medical record and saying, first, Russell, last, R-E-A-S, and you'd spell Reese out because it's an unusual spelling of the word Reese. And you could say born, and then you could dictate the date of birth. That's obviously an easy example. But maybe a harder example would be sections or groupings. So if I was doing a cardiovascular abstraction, maybe I could say lesion 1, the length is a 100, culprit, yes. And so we can imagine devising systems using low-resolution interfaces, using technology that's available today to deploy more efficient, higher quality abstractions, and not thinking about deploying technology more recklessly and running into the challenges that we just observed. So I want to maybe summarize that for everybody, because, like I said, we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole with NLP there, and maybe just tying it back to our topic here. We will not get there. The demands that the industry are placing on us will not get there through just being more efficient and centralizing. We need to look to technology, I think, to move the needle incrementally. But as we explore that technology, we need to think about the overconfidence problem and maybe some other big picture problems that are presented when you're exploring new technology. And in response to that problem, we want to think about how we're presenting answers and the interfaces that we're building for abstractors to actually challenge where we're not 100%, we don't think we're 100% accurate, and just empower our experts to make the right decisions, because that's truly what we believe. Even as we go down this path of automation, even as we explore technology to further automate parts of this strategic imperative we have to report quality, there will always be a need for an expert to steward that system, whether it's to understand how to use the data to improve quality or to make sure that the data we're abstracting is accurate and fully represents the quality of care that we're delivering. So I think that's a really important point that we wanted to make. Michelle, that concludes the technical portion of the webinar. So what questions do we have?
So, Brian, how soon do you think hospitals will be using NLP technology for data abstraction?
Well, they are absolutely using it now. There are some hospitals that are maybe piloting with some organizations to deploy these kinds of technologies. I think this will start to get scale maybe in the coming years, not by the end of this year, maybe start further and further next year, but maybe end of 18, 19, 20, that kind of timeline. Frankly, our company, Q-Centrix, is absolutely exploring this technology now. I want to make it clear, if you're working with us today and you called us tomorrow, we're not deploying that technology for our production efforts now. But when we work with hospitals, when we integrate with hospitals, we are asking for not just structured data, we're asking for the unstructured data, because we believe later this year and next year we can start incrementally deploying the technology to find where there's an opportunity to further automate the abstraction process. So, I mean, I think this journey will last 5, 10, 15 years. If you look at that self-driving car example, maybe they're at stage 2 or 3, we're at 0. But I still think we'll start deploying now, and it'll be a journey, decades long.
So you think probably ultimately NLP will be the way to go?
I'm sorry, ask the question again.
So one of the questions that we had was that, do you think that NLP will be the way to go, or kind of be the way of the future of collecting this data?
I think it is one way to go that some vendors are exploring now. I think there's lots of technology that will be deployed in other industries that we'll use. I don't think it's the only way to go at all. Like I said, I think experts will be relevant in this role for a very long time. And frankly, I'm excited to see where the exploration of this technology takes us. And then the EMRs will evolve. They will evolve. They're just not evolving fast enough to take care of the demand that we have placed on us right now.
Great. I think that's good for this section. Why don't we move on to the next section?
Great. So we got one more closing section that we wanted to walk you through. This should take maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then we should have plenty of time to wrap up and have some final questions and observations. And by the way, if you're submitting questions, we're getting a lot of them. So if you're submitting questions and we're not getting to them, we will absolutely be reaching out to you all to ask you offline if there's any answers we can provide to you. Well, what we wanted to close with, though, is just maybe a brief discussion about understanding how to balance keeping clinicians close to data and at the top of license, because that's really what this is all about. We have reporting burdens, and that data is important, but we want to be taking care of patients and reducing this reporting burden. So as we've discussed, hospitals can exert greater control over data fidelity, deadline management, and cost to quality program participation by centralizing resources and consolidating information systems. A lot of hospitals we find, though, are still struggling to balance those factors against the real and perceived loss of control at the service line and facility level. And we call this the paradox of the loss of control. We truly believe that if you can get out of the weeds on a particular issue and you can have somebody who's fully accountable for that part of your process, for that part of your value chain, and is doing great quality work and is accountable for that functioning correctly, you can design a system that provides more value to your organization versus being so consumed with detail that you're unable to sort of survey the world and the context for which that process fits. So a lot of hospitals are still struggling with this balance, and I think it's absolutely relevant, and you got to go when you're ready to go, but this is what we're seeing in the market today. And the tools that hospitals deploy to centralize, they must effectively provide a feedback loop to the service line operators to run their businesses. So if you have held somebody accountable for a particular process, you absolutely have to implement tools that give a feedback loop to everybody who is impacted by that process. But the bottom line is that the reality is that the macroeconomic factors that we're seeing in healthcare today are forcing hospitals to do more with less. So you've got to have clinicians performing a top of license instead of being stuck in data. And we've said this a couple of times, and we reiterate this all the time when we're talking to people in the market. We're all being forced to do more with less, and so you've got to find a way to get your clinicians impacting patient care and doing process improvement. And like I said, particularly with the push to patient-reported outcomes, I think that the NQF in particular is asking measures developers to develop more outcomes measures, more patient-reported outcomes measures, and far fewer process measures. And that will have a significant impact on how you're deploying your resources within your hospital, because you have to maximize your performance in those. So what are we seeing in the market? As an organization, we talk to hundreds, maybe thousands of people every year about quality reporting challenges. Me individually, I talk to hundreds of people every year about this stuff, and not just potential partners. We talk to folks at the NQF, at CMS, all over the country, thought leaders, and so we want to share with you a couple of things that we're seeing and hearing. And here are a few emerging trends. It has become almost impossible for hospitals to keep up with reporting volume while maintaining effective patient care and process improvement without seeing burnout, turnover in their reporting staff. And the further niche you go with a particular reporting topic, the more difficulty hospitals are having keeping up with that. Keeping clinical resources performing at top of license is as important as it ever has been, as hospitals continue to be asked to do more with less. Maybe a couple competing trends that we're seeing. First, many hospitals would like to participate in more registries. All the time we talk to members of the professional societies themselves who have hospitals reaching out to them to say, how can you help me reduce the data burden on these 3 registries, because I actually have 4 more that I want to participate in, some of which are with you all. And we talk to medical directors who say, I've got clinicians who want me to participate in a brand new registry. It's important to them, but I'm sort of already tapped out on the registries I'm participating in over here. So how do I find a way to participate in these wish list registries? On the other hand, many hospitals don't have a good handle on every single registry they're participating in the first place. We talk to folks all the time who say, I literally just found out I've got a backlog in this registry. We talk to folks who say that the professional society or the third party reaches out to them and say they're behind on something they didn't even know they had an obligation to report on. You see this where somebody goes out on short-term disability. You see this where somebody leaves an organization and you sort of lose control over all of the obligations you've got as a facility to report data. And so this is another challenge. And like I said, maybe it's the opposite of the other one, where if you knew you had resources submitting to a registry that you weren't aware of and you had one on your wish list, that sort of makes maybe those two things match up if the skill set is the same. And then finally, as hospitals centralize, they can consolidate vendors and information systems, but the market really is lacking for modern, enterprise-ready tools. So particularly when we're talking to a 5 or 10 hospital health system, they will say to us, we've centralized, But now we found out that 3 of our hospitals use one vendor and 2 of our hospitals use another, and 1 of our hospitals just fired their vendor and they didn't realize they needed to submit to these 2 things. And so I think everyone understands intuitively that there's a consolidation opportunity there, and that would obviously save money as you get leverage. But I think what they're struggling more with is who should they choose, and do they provide – they've always done a pretty good job of getting my data where it had to go, and I get a bunch of volume of metrics back for that, but does that vendor truly give me enterprise capabilities? And so our advice is you got to stay close to data, but you can't stay too close to data collection. So develop processes that keep data current within the systems you use to report and analyze clinical data. And what we mean by that is whether you work with a partner or not, you got to devote resources solely to data management activities. It's really tough when somebody has PI obligations and clinical obligations, and they're abstracting. You need to invest in partnerships that alleviate data submission challenges, so enterprise capabilities, ability to compare hospitals to hospitals. And frankly, you should be investing in partnerships where the vendors are thinking about how to continually evolve their capabilities to keep up with what you're being asked to keep up with. Invest in systems that provide access to actionable information that focus on the right KPIs that will improve your clinical service lines. Every single registry has got dozens of KPIs you can use to manage your performance. Most of the time, not all dozens of those metrics are actually useful in maybe day-to-day management. You've got to be innovative, experimental, and bold in your management of your quality data. You got to select a handful of metrics you need to run your service lines from week to week, month to month, and year to year. And sometimes that means maybe coming up with your own flavor of a metric, but it absolutely means selecting the cross-section of metrics that you use to keep control of your quality. And so maybe trying to tie all this together as we conclude, and as you try and plan for the future now that I've eaten up some of your lunch hour. The explosion of unstructured data will continue unabated. This is not going to stop. Hospitals must find a way to unlock the value of that data without continually burdening providers to change their documentation practices. Hospitals and systems that do this will have better health outcomes, lower costs, happier patients, and a competitive advantage in the markets they compete in. You want to choose partners that are exploring how modern technology can continue to capture larger amounts of data quickly and accurately. Consolidation and centralization will also continue because it saves money and improves data timeliness and fidelity for health systems. As I said, I don't want to take this as a foregone conclusion that you must centralize. That is not what we're saying at all. This trend has taken hold of the market for some bigger reasons than all of us, because of cost savings opportunities and quality improvement, and so it should be something you're thinking about. And your technology and services partners should be enterprise ready with capabilities that will allow you to capture, submit, analyze, and report across the breadth of your quality obligations. So I can tell I've been talking too much, Michelle, because my mouth is really dry. I'll take a sip of water while you tell me if we've got a question.
Yes. So thank you, Brian. That was awesome. That was an excellent summary of kind of best practices. We are coming a little bit up on time. We said we only go about 45 minutes, so I'm just going to have one question. We talked about how there's more data, more requirements, less resources that these health systems are facing. Can you provide an example of a hospital or health system that's really employing the best practices in these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, I want to use an example of someone we're working with.
Sure. Sure.
I'm thinking of a health system in Texas that has maybe 7 facilities, and they have a lot of the challenges that we talked about. They're using more than one vendor to submit. They wanted to save some money. And they wanted to improve quality. They really care about moving the needle in the performance of the service lines that they're submitting data to the registries for, because that's their rationale. They need that registry data, frankly, to improve process and patient care. That's why they're participating. They took the first step of centralizing, and we partner with them to centralize. But what they're trying to do now is, first of all, they really want to narrow down on the handful of metrics that they will use corporately to drive influence at the individual facilities. So these are cardiovascular registries, like I said, taking CAF-PCI, for example. There's dozens of metrics there. They're really focusing on about 10. The other thing they've done is said, we agree with Professional Society or the ACC on 8 or 10 of those KPIs. We have our own, though. We have our own flavor of metrics that we want to deploy, and there's maybe 2 or 3 of those. And we need to have the capability to collect that data, calculate those measures at an enterprise level. I got to be able to see them in an application for all 7 of my hospitals easily, drill down to the individual facilities, and I can't spend time with an analyst digging data out of an individual facility. I've got to have it all there for my management team to see on a dashboard so we can reach out to the facilities and help them understand where we want them to go. So they're in the process of consolidating. They've got a partner in helping them do that. We don't do everything for them. They're in the process of deploying a handful of standard metrics and bespoke measures to drive the kind of performance improvement that they want at those 7 facilities. And then they collaborate really effectively with those individual facilities because those are the folks that are in charge of actually making the improvement. The corporate entity needs to know where they stand corporately. They want to have some influence over the individual facilities, but ultimately the facility has to take the initiative to want to improve quality. I hope that answers the question that we got, and if the person who asked it wants to reach back out to me, I'm happy to have a further conversation on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. We are right at time now. As Brian mentioned, we do have all your questions collected here, and we will reach out to you individually. We'll also have a recording of this webinar that we will share back out with everyone who registered. Many thanks to Brian. You can, if you would like to reach out to Brian directly, you could reach him at brian@qcentrix.com. And thanks again. That's the end of our webinar.